Good day with your major newscast. I'm Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. The Alliance for Change is accusing the governing People's Progressive Party administration of stalling the Public Accounts Committee process of shortlisting names for the Public Procurement Commission. One parliamentary political party is calling for the restart of amending election laws and to include the Law Reform Commission and other experts. Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Minister Stuart Young is warning Guyana and Suriname about opportunists who would like to take advantage of the oil sector in the two countries. The Caribbean Examination Council yesterday announced that preparations have started to put a new examination in place for a school. The health minister says to expect more cases and possible COVID deaths from low vaccinated regions despite a decline in cases overall. In the region, a new charter of Barbados was presented to Parliament that, while not legally binding, outlines citizens' rights and responsibilities as the island prepares to become a republic. And internationally, the U.S. says it is releasing 50 million barrels of oil from its reserves in an attempt to bring down soaring energy and petrol prices. The details of these stories and more in just a moment.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. The Alliance for Change says that the governing People's Progressive Party, PPP, is dragging its feet on the process for the appointment of members of the Public Procurement Commission, PCC. Opposition member of the Public Accounts Committee, PAC, and the former chairman of the PAC, David Patterson, says the PAC has begun the process to have the members approved first by the PAC, but is suffering setback by the government. The PAC is now to shortlist 5 names from a list of 30 applicants for whom background checks were completed.
Names came back, and since the recess, the opposition has been trying to meet with the lead person, which is Madam Gail Teixeira, up for the subcommittee to further discuss this program, this matter. Unfortunately, to date, we were unable to. She is unable to facilitate the meeting.
During a PAC meeting on Monday, November 22, Governance Minister Gail Teixeira committed to seeing the process moving forward. Mr. Patterson says he is unimpressed and not hopeful.
Yesterday, it came up again in PSC, and we were promised that sometime this week we can restart the process of examining the names so that we could further shortlist them. I am not hopeful because the PPP doesn't, as you can see based on what's going on now, they don't see this as a priority. They actually returning to the pre-2015 position, which they claim that the Public Procurement Commission was unconstitutional and it takes away the power from cabinet to make decisions. That's their exact words, and the former President Ramachar's exact words to the Alliance for Change. So we will keep pressing, but that is the current status.
A civil society group has threatened to take legal action for the president's breach of constitutional provisions that provides for the appointment of several commissions and bodies. President Ali, since taking office more than a year ago, has not appointed any except the Local Government Commission. The Alliance for Change, AFC, is calling on the government to begin a fresh process to amend election laws and involve the Constitutional Law Reform Commission, LRC, and other competent bodies.
The AFC does not see these amendments as a genuine, honest response to the problems which exist and which ought to be cured. It sees these amendments as a platform for PPP to take off in a full course of gerrymandering of District 4 to its advantage. It urges the restart of the process with all participants and stakeholders playing their roles and having their say from a drafting stage to completion stage with the help of experts who should be hired by the Law Reform Commission or can be from international and regional centers.
Leader of the AFC, Kemraj Ramjatan, at a media conference on Tuesday, said the Law Reform Commission is the commission to supervise and advise on law changes. Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan says the government is making the LRC a toothless poodle.
The Attorney General and the government of Guyana, they formed what is called a Law Reform Commission. And they were very adamant that the Law Reform Commission must have a say as to every major piece of legislation to be amended or to be brought in the Parliament. Now, it is a very useful piece of scrutiny coming from that kind of commission, because they are going to ensure that they know the purpose of the existing law, the weaknesses and defects of it, and what can be the best proposals for strengthening it or to cover the lacuna in the law.
The AFC leader says the party studied the amendments and found them to be unacceptable and biasly recommended.
The AFC, having deliberated on the PPP's recommended changes to the Representation of the People Act, has become even more non-supportive and suspicious of the purport and content of the amendments. The party maintains that the unilateral and stealthy nature of these amendments reveal, like other developments since its installation into office, a further removal by the PPP government from meaningful consultation and participation on serious matters such as electoral reform. This biased, subjectivist process has poisoned these amendments beyond acceptance.
The AFC leader says the draft amendments are not geared to cure but to drive fear and reluctance of persons to seek those offices, which opens the door for party loyalists to be employed. Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan believes that the draconian penalties are there to be applied in a biased manner to whom the government targets. Former Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Dr. Vincent Adams, and a member of the Alliance for Change, is calling on the government not to approve the Yellowtail project until ExxonMobil agrees to audit its $9.5 billion bill submitted to Guyana. Dr. Vincent Adams, who was fired by the present administration as director of the EPA, wants the government to ensure that ExxonMobil expenses submitted to Guyana for reimbursement to be audited. Dr. Adams calls for the withholding of approval of one project Exxon is seeking to develop to get the audit.
The AFC is calling upon the government to not approve the Yellowtail project until Exxon agrees to this audit. A similar demand of the EPA under the coalition proved to be successful in obtaining unlimited liability assurance coverage from the parent companies of EPGL as a condition for approving the Liza 2 project. But unfortunately, true to form, the PPP civic government promptly reversed that decision.
Former Public Infrastructure Minister under the APNU plus AFC coalition, David Patterson, says it's important for Guyana to know what is included in Exxon's $9.5 billion bill to Guyana.
Included in this $9 billion are other such costs as the cost of Exxon's new headquarters being constructed in Ogle. Every time Exxon charters a private plane to travel from the USA to Guyana, this cost is cost reimbursable. Every function that Exxon hosts, every bottle of wild wine drank by the invitees at these functions can be listed as cost recoverable. Every social media ad claiming that the company is a good corporate citizen is cost recoverable. Included in this $9 billion will be the salaries for persons in Houston and other parts of the world who the company may claim are working on Guyana's projects. In fact, every single item, despite how remote, with even the merest or no connection to Guyana, can be included in these costs.
Mr. David Patterson reminded that while in opposition, the PPP called for an audit of Exxon pre-contract cost of $460 million. He says that audit was completed more than a year ago and questioned why the result of that audit is not released to the public. Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Minister Stuart Young is warning Guyana and Suriname about opportunists who would like to take advantage of the oil sector. He was Tuesday morning addressing the first policy forum organized by the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago.
The same Surinamese delegation that you met with last week, we also met with, and I gave them a commitment that there is a complete open door policy. In fact, I told them it would be to their benefit. There are going to be a lot of carpetbaggers, as I call them, rushing to Suriname and to Guyana, selling them what they consider the best advice in the world and trying to lead them down garden paths. They can learn from Trinidad and Tobago, and we are willing at the government level to facilitate that, to share our experiences, to share our ideas.
At the same time, the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Minister is urging the Energy Chamber in his country, which is well positioned, to take advantage of opportunities in sister Caribbean community CARICOM member states.
Regional integration is something some of us strive for and hope for, but we must be realistic as well of the difficulties that we, Trinidad and Tobago, may have in entering other regional jurisdictions. Again, I give the commitment that the government is willing to work with the membership of the Energy Chamber to listen and for us to formulate a strategy to ensure that our personnel, our services, and our assets and what it is we can offer as Trinidad and Tobago to our regional brothers and sisters can be made available.
Prior to returning to office last August, the People's Progressive Party had been very critical about the numerous Trinidad and Tobago companies that had been coming to work in Guyana's oil sector. The Irfanali-led administration has since said that certain areas such as catering, lawn mowing, laundry, and trucking are services that are reserved for Guyanese. The Caribbean Examinations Council, CXC, yesterday announced that preparations have started to put a new examination in place. Addressing the opening of a CXC ministerial summit, the Registrar and Chief Executive Officer of that regional examining body, Dr. Wayne Wesley, says the aim is to reduce the number of secondary school students leaving without certification. Dr. Wesley says its Research, Insights, and Production Innovation Department has started discussing a new design of the framework for the award of certification. Among the plans, he says, is the introduction of a new certificate named the Caribbean Technical Education Certificate, CTEC.
CTEC will be a broad-based qualification geared towards character development, technical and applied competencies for employment, entrepreneurship, and good citizenry. In other words, a sense of regional pride. The CTEC would represent the minimum competencies for an individual to perform in society while providing opportunities for students to continue to pursue the CSEC and CAPE at an appropriate time of readiness.
The CXC registrar says the CTEC's aim is to give opportunities to as many secondary school leavers as possible through regional certification.
This, we believe, will create alternative pathways for all candidates as we seek to promote equity with all qualifications issued by CXC, ensuring that value and parity of esteem are placed on all qualifications.
CXC Registrar and Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Wayne Wesley. Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, has called on the Caribbean Examination Council, CXC, to make history a compulsory subject in schools in CARICOM. Dr. Ralph Gonsalves was at the time delivering keynote remarks at the Regional Examination Body Inaugural Education Ministerial Summit under the theme Facilitating Transformation Through Assessment. Dr. Gonsalves says understanding and appreciating the birth of regional institutions will come through knowing how the key institutions were formed.
Before 1972, this CXC didn't exist. We need to understand how it came about and its journey to where we are today. That has to be done through a historical analysis. These are things which have taken place in our Caribbean civilization. And the way in which we can grasp these things is to understand our history. I want to begin by making the point very strongly that I've been on record of supporting the making of history to be compulsory in secondary schools.
The St. Vincent Prime Minister says history seems to belong to lesser mortals since most feel that science subjects are more for the brilliant students. PM Gonsalves told the summit that history is key for CARICOM.
When I speak to the question of history and look at the way it connects with our regional integration movement and development, sustainable development, we would see the necessity and desirability for having the subject compulsory on our syllabus for the secondary schools. I wouldn't be surprised if you take a poll across the Caribbean among teachers and students, and you were to pose the question as to name recognition and importance to our region, and you ask them who it is, whether it's Walter Rodney or Walter Raleigh, more than likely Walter Raleigh is going to win out. It is an indictment of our own education system and perhaps of CXC itself, and that is why this is so critical that this discussion has arisen.
Dr. Gonsalves urged that teaching contemporary history in schools address areas of the molding of the Caribbean and its international relations with global groups. He says our understanding of ourselves as a region will come from learning that history.
To understand all of these things and the role they have played in our Caribbean civilization and in our development and certainly in our integration movement, we can't grasp them unless we have a study of our history, of the social movements, of the economic structures, of the institutions, of the links between the metropole and the hinterland, between modern capitalism and the globalized world, and the nexus between those things and the external trade arrangements between ourselves and Europe and North America.
The summit, which was held yesterday, saw presentations from 12 speakers to address various aspects of transforming the regional education body to deliver education to enhance the educational capacity and needs of the region. The health minister says to expect more cases and possible COVID deaths from low vaccinated regions despite a decline in cases overall. Dr. Frank Anthony says there are hot spots in Region 4 East Coast, East Bank and Georgetown, Region 3 and Region 6. He, however, pointed to regions with a low vaccination rate that could possibly pose a challenge.
In the areas where we have a lot of people still remain unvaccinated, unfortunately, we are going to have more cases. And some of those cases are going to be severe and would require hospitalization. So the regions right now with the lowest vaccination rates would be Region 10, Region 8, and Region 2. And we would therefore expect that at some point, when we get cases from these regions, we will probably see some of the more severe cases coming out that require hospitalization. And if people remain unvaccinated, some of them will die.
Dr. Anthony has reported lower active cases and hospitalization.
We have 1,836 active cases, and over the last 24 hours, we got about 95 new cases. Of the 1,836 cases, we now have 58 persons in hospital, with 33 of those persons at the Ocean View Hospital. And 9 of them is in the ICU.
2 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours, taking the death toll to 979. The ministry says 396,840 adults and 28,769 children are partially vaccinated, while 271,206 adults and 19,946 children are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Now for the news in the region. Exactly a week before Barbados transitions to a republic, a new charter of Barbados was presented to Parliament that, while not legally binding, outlines the citizens' rights and responsibilities. More in this report from Barbados Today.
The Charter sets out a series of pledges which outlines that Barbados will be a peaceful, just and equitable country grounded in the enfranchisement of all citizens. Leading off debate in Parliament, Prime Minister Mia Mottley sought to make it clear that the Charter was not replacing the existing constitution.
And even as we have these discussions, we have to continue to remind people this is not the Constitution of Barbados. This is not the preamble for the existing or future Constitution. This is simply a charter that says these are the things that matter to us, and this is the kind of people that we would like to be and the kind of country we would like to have.
The Charter sparked heated debate, starting with opposition leader Bishop Joseph Avili. He blasted the government for not including the word God and the inclusion of sexual orientation in the first article of the document. In his lengthy submission in the House of Assembly, Avili charged that government was moving in the wrong direction.
But Barbados feels that we must enshrine in a charter this reference to sexual orientation. Mr. Speaker, we can go to the Caribbean, go to Canada.
In a stern rebuke, Minister of Labour and Social Relations Colin Jordan told the opposition leader Barbados is not a theocracy. He suggested that the language of the Charter is reflective of Barbadian society.
But there's a role for the state and there's a role for the church. And when I say the church, I'm referring to the Christian church. There's a role for people of faith. I believe in the strict separation of church and state. I believe that people of faith have a role in the actions, in the deliberations, in the decision-making of the state, but not from the perspective of giving directions and insisting that my view or somebody else's view should be the view.
Barbados' Minister of Labour and Social Relations, Colin Jordan, ending that report from Barbados today. Barbados will become a republic on November 30. This means that the Queen of England will no longer be the titular head of state represented by the Governor-General. Instead, Barbados will have its own non-executive president. The Health Ministry in Antigua and Barbuda has discovered approximately 40 COVID vaccination cards which are said to have been falsified by a local nurse. An Observer Antigua news report stated that Minister of Health Malwin Joseph confirmed that his ministry is currently investigating the matter and will turn it over to the police once their internal probe is complete. Minister Malwin Joseph, speaking on state media, says, fortunately, the incident does not appear to be widespread in the context of vaccinating over 60,000 people, with the identification of about 100, but the ministry is aware of 40. The female suspect, reportedly from Otos, is said to be the subject of the investigation, where the fake temporary yellow cards were allegedly being sold for $1,700 each. An employee of the Sir Leicester Bird Medical Centre has confirmed that the woman, who also works at the hospital, was a volunteer at the vaccine site. According to the credible source, the crime was detected a week ago. The health minister says that the woman has been relieved of her duties until the matter has been resolved. He points that all of the fraudulent cards will be identified in a short order. Trinidad and Tobago's Deputy Commissioner of Police Mcdonald says attacks on social media are affecting the morale of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Ttps. Deputy Commissioner of Police Mcdonald Jacob said yesterday that over the last few months, the Ttps and its members have seen several disparaging statements and allegations made against them, which have had psychological effects on officers of all ranks. He says there are attempts by some persons to convey that there is disunity in the Ttps. The deputy top cop says that are coming from persons in the Ttps and the public slandering the organization and its members on social media. Mr. McDonald Jacob says several officers have been referred to the services, social workers, psychologists. He says senior officers cry because of allegations made against them on social media that were not true. The senior police officer says in other instances, ranks took vacations to avoid further trauma after their names and pictures are being posted on social media and their reputations are being affected. The deputy top cop says he himself had not been spared and had been attacked this year for doing his duty in 1984 when he took the witness stand against an officer who beat a civilian in his presence. And lastly, in the region, the Equal Opportunity Tribunal says it accepts a High Court decision in a matter between the tribunal and attorney Vera Bajan regarding her presidential appointment. Loop News reported that the tribunal said Tuesday it would abide by the decision handed by Judge Everson Quillan Williams in a matter against Chairman Donna Purwell-Raphael for failing to give effect to Bajan's presidential appointment as a lay assessor. The tribunal says it has been guided by best practices and professional advice at all times and says it respects the ruling. The tribunal added that it will meet with attorneys to determine the next steps. Bajan, who was born without arms, had been appointed as a lay assessor to the tribunal by President Paula May Weeks in March 2021. However, legal action was later filed after she was unable to take up her position. Bajan is an attorney at law who specializes in civil law, including corporate, commercial, contract, employment, and probate law. Here now is your international news from the BBC.
BBC News, I'm John Shea. 3 political parties in Germany have struck a deal to form the next government, which will put an increased emphasis on environmental measures. The Social Democrats, the Greens and the Free Democrats have given the first details of their coalition agreement. They want 80% of Germany's energy supply to be made up of renewables by 2030. That's faster than the previous target, and they aim to speed up the phasing out of coal. Damien McGuinness has more details.
This deal is agreed. The next stage is these proposals would then be put to the members of each party and then be voted on. If all goes well, Olaf Scholz could then be sworn in as Chancellor on December 6th. That is a pretty fast timeline, and that's mainly because of the pandemic, because as we know, Germany is seeing the worst period of its pandemic right now, and this vacuum period between two governments is not good for pushing through new measures. So that's why the urgency is there really to get the new government in place as soon as possible.
The United States has designated 3 leaders of the Islamic State militant group in Afghanistan as global terrorists. The US government said it was committed to ensuring that Afghanistan could not become a platform for international terrorism again. The action makes it illegal to have any business transactions with the men. Earlier, a senior member of the Afghan Taliban, Anas Haqqani, denied that the group's fighters were defecting to Islamic State.
We are not worried about our fighters defecting to ISK, as they have been through hard times with us. It is only those who are getting paid a lot by NATO that are worried about money. Those poor guys are upset because they have lost their luxurious lifestyles. It's also not true that ISK are paying big salaries. It's just propaganda.
The head of the UN nuclear watchdog has said he could not agree in talks with Iranian officials to resolve disputes over the country's atomic program. Rafael Grossi said time was now running out to salvage the international nuclear deal reached with Iran in 2015. He told reporters that, despite failure to reach an agreement, he would not give up on resolving outstanding issues.
In particular, I want to restore the monitoring and verification capacities that we need. Restore cameras, service the equipment, all of these things. These are very important, and I need to do this. In the course of a negotiation, you try different things, you approach it in a different way, different combinations. It was not possible for Iran to agree with us.
The French international footballer Karim Benzema has been found guilty of involvement in attempted blackmail over a sex tape. The Real Madrid player, who's due to play a Champions League match later today, has been given a 1-year suspended prison sentence and a fine of more than $80,000. This is the latest world news from the BBC. Israel says it's signed a defence memorandum with Morocco, paving the way for possible military sales and enhanced cooperation between the two countries. The deal was agreed during a visit to Morocco by the Israeli Defence Minister, Benny Gantz, who met his Moroccan counterpart, Abdelatif Loudii. Taiwan has welcomed an invitation from the United States to take part in a virtual summit for democracy next month. Taipei said it would allow the island to share its democratic success story with other countries. But the invitation will further complicate the poor relations between the US and China. Beijing maintains that Taiwan is part of its own territory and has no right to attend international events. The Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's taken part in tests of a nasal vaccine for coronavirus. He told members of his government that he was part of a trial of a powder inhaled through the nose and had taken it not long after receiving his second shot of the Russian vaccine Sputnik V. Malawi's Agriculture Ministry has written to the former world heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson to ask him to be the ambassador for the country's cannabis crop. Last year, Malawi legalised the growing and processing of the plant for medicinal use. Will Ross has the story.
Malawi's Agriculture Ministry has been encouraging farmers to grow cannabis for medicinal purposes as well as hemp for industrial use. It hopes that by teaming up with Mike Tyson, who runs a multi-million-dollar cannabis business in the United States, new markets can be found for the crop. The former boxer, who was imprisoned for sex offences in the 1990s, has said smoking cannabis helped improve his mental health and turn his life around. Officials in Malawi are not considering changing the law when it comes to the growing of chamba, the world-renowned cannabis strain known as Malawi Gold. It's been grown for generations, but is still illegal.
Will Ross reporting. And that's the latest BBC World News.
And that was your international news. Here now is a recap of the highlights. The Alliance for Change is accusing the governing People's Progressive Party administration of stalling the Public Accounts Committee process of shortlisting names for the Public Procurement Commission. One parliamentary political party is calling for the restart of amending election laws and to include the Law Reform Commission and other experts. Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Minister Stuart Young is warning Guyana and Suriname about opportunists who would like to take advantage of the oil sector in the two countries. The Caribbean Examinations Council yesterday announced that preparations have started to put a new examination in place for school. The health minister says to expect more cases and possible COVID deaths from low-vaccinated regions, despite a decline in cases overall. In the region, a new charter of Barbados was presented to Parliament that, while not legally binding, outlines the citizens' rights and responsibilities as the island prepared to become a republic. And internationally, the U.S. says it is releasing 50 million barrels of oil from its reserves in an attempt to bring down the soaring energy and petrol prices. And that was your major newscast. I'm Jessica Daw.